In part one with Anne, a professional futurist and researcher, we explored the fact that in order for organizations to not only survive in the increasingly competitive business environment, but also to thrive, there is an intensifying need for them to be able to imagine the future through divergent scenarios and, more importantly, incorporate more diverse and inclusive perspectives. In part two, we continue to learn more about how Foresight works and how it influences organizations in making more robust strategic choices.
How would you sort of advise or give your input or thoughts to organizations who are looking to the future?
We have an acronym called STEEP, and it stands for social, technological, environmental, economic, and political. And if you are looking for changes and you're really unsure that if you have a good information feed on each of those domains, and you try to envision what happens when some of these come together, what kind of future, what will that entail for your organization, you've really made the first step. As we talked about, the information sources are becoming more and more skewed, and we, as humans, we are unfortunately limited by confirmation biases and experience biases, and we have all of these different cognitive biases that can make it difficult for us. So sometimes it's useful to use some sort of data analytics methodology, like some sort of framework that can help ensure that you actually get all of the information that you need. It's really, the beauty is really between like employing both the human intelligence and the machine intelligence. Disinterested approach from the machine and the sort of more discerning approaches of the human mind, and kind of combine that together. But the main thing is that you leave no stone unturned, that you really keep an open mind that surprises can come from the least expected. And when it does, you throw a stone in the water and then suddenly the rings become bigger and bigger, and you don't know exactly what it is that is going to be that ripple effect. It really is about keeping an open mind and using information for what it's worth. And that's difficult because now, we have more information out there. You really need a strategy. It's very important to devise a very good information strategy.
And that entails analyzing the data correctly, the most efficient way, right? I like that analogy you said of throwing a stone in the water and creating that ripple effect. Something that's unexpected or quite small can actually have quite a big impact. Would you be able to just briefly go through each of the elements of STEEP, just to give a little explainer?
So if you look at social trends, having been one who works mainly with generational change, that's kind of embedded in that bucket, where you look at what are different changes in culture, in demographics, that can vary quite a bit from country to country. There are some, social trends that are pretty global. Some societies are getting older, some are getting, having more younger people. You look at technological trends, you need to keep an eye on Internet of Things. You need to look at artificial intelligence, different types of biotechnology, gene editing, renewable energies, the progress that's happening there, storage of renewable energy, etc. So you move into environmental trends. It's almost impossible to think of any change in the future without looking at our ecosystem and what that is doing to us. And that's really sort of the outer confines of what we can do as a human society, right? So you have to keep an eye on that. So looking at how, for example, income disparities are growing when automation takes over more of the production processes, where you risk having more and more unemployment because artificial intelligence is taking over. I think that's a little bit overstated at the moment. I think that many futurists and technologists have been very quick to talk about things like artificial general intelligence, which is where you can train a machine on a data set, and then you can apply that intelligence in many different ways and take that a little bit further. You get super intelligence and you get conscious artificial intelligence and things like that. I believe that we're quite a step away from that. Comparing humans and machines are a little bit like comparing apples and oranges, because what makes us humans are not necessarily so much only our intelligence, but there's a lot of other things about being humans that we don't see in computers. We don't see that we're not even trying to replicate it. Very often when we look at automation taking over our jobs, we're looking at some very specific jobs. I don't think we're looking at the full spectrum. The problem with that from an economic point of view is obviously that you bifurcate your economy to an extent where only the owners of the machines are making the money. And then, of course, all of this sort of culminate into that bucket called politics. Except there's in politics, there's also people with agendas and institutions with agendas. It's like, it's not just taking things at what it looks like and not only derive sort of what it's logical based on all of these other trends that we've seen, but what are some of the independent forces inside a bucket called politics who are the people with the different interests and stakeholders, etc. So it's quite a soup. You put all these pieces together, it can be quite laborsome. And I think especially, again, because it's harder and harder, even though we have more and more information, to ensure that you get a wide enough representation of information. And this is where I think natural language processing and machine intelligence can really help us and move along. And then I would say that the parting thought is to keep a sense of humility about the future, because it will surprise you. You will be able to make some small predictions here and there. And again, we have machines that can help us predict with very high level of certainty what may happen, at least, with not too long of a time horizon. But to keep that humility that if you're going to look at what everything's going to look like in the future, what society will look like in the future, there are too many confluencing variables that can predict it. You can still use the data to look for the signs of possible change. You just cannot use those observations as an affirmation that one particular future is going to happen. Always try to keep a very open mind and always keep abreast about the latest changes in that domain that you study, and keep an open mind. Try to fight those cognitive biases that we are all victims of. There's no way out of it. We will always have cognitive bias to deal with. And the good thing about that is that, especially in a year like 2020, where there's been so many surprises that may not have been exactly what we want, the good thing about that is that it really tells us that the future can be pretty marvelous. Even if it looks very bleak and very dark right now, it is absolutely not predictable, and it's very possible that it can look much better. And the way for it to look better is to make it better. It's actually what we do. So when we look at these trends, it's because we want to make a change within that window of opportunity that we have before that future manifests. So it's not to just predict it and say, this is set in stone, this is what's going to happen. It's about envisioning what might happen so that we can either prevent it or create it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Anne. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you for sparing the time to be on Culture Matters. You've been a fantastic guest.
Thank you so much for having me. This was really a pleasure, and it's such an honor to have been your guest.
Anne has given us the basic principles of how leaders and organizations can use strategic foresight to imagine future opportunities. Foresight provokes insight, so it's critical to have the right intentions in order to transform your predictions into actionable steps. We discussed the need to use these insights with humility and take action with regards to these trends, so we can make the necessary changes within the window of opportunity we have before that future manifests itself. We're grateful that you've joined us on this two-part journey of the Think Like a Futurist episode.